Wait for the go-ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, March 31st, 2025. We're here this morning for a work session, and it is regarding addressing. I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me are my fellow commissioners, Commissioner John Kafalis and Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally. We also have our Assistant County Manager, Lori Kadrich, with us. And I'm going to turn things over to Greg Turnbull from IT, and he is going to talk about the new road naming and addressing system.
Yes.
So welcome and thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Greg Turnbull, as mentioned, Director of Innovations and Insights within the Information Technology Department. I've brought along with me Christine Day, the Geospatial Lead/Manager. She actually does all the work, and her team does all the work. I'm just here to present. There's been a lot of shared work in this draft with both ourselves, our partners. I'll have Bill Ressu in the back, or William Ressu, who also has done a lot of work in this resolution. And we've set up a presentation just to kind of go through some of the highlights, some of the whys this is happening. But the goal with this resolution was to create something that we could launch from. The original resolution was built in support of a project. It was just a continuation of a project. And over time, it wasn't even really utilized. It was cumbersome a bit to try and navigate for both property owners and even our staff to try and make it workable. So we'll dive in. If there's questions along the way, please present those. And then we'll also have some time, hopefully at the end, to actually dive into the document if you have questions specifically. So we'll kick it off. So just a quick agenda. Why was the update needed? I kind of hinted at that a little bit. It's been nearly 20 years since the original document was put in place, and we needed alignment to what was needed today. There were some clarity issues, some efficiency that needed to be built in, and also some alignment to public safety. There's some new processes that we really wanted to cover and outline in the presentation. And then also, we just want to highlight some of the public safety issues that we've seen. And this is just two of the more present examples. And then we want to talk a little bit about Christine and her team and what they've built, like as you mentioned, to support this resolution and support the system and engagement. So we dive in right away. So a lot happens in 20 years. The previous resolution, as I mentioned, was really in support or continuation of the project, the rural addressing project. We were looking with this new revision to create an ongoing role and really highlight what the addressing coordinator was tasked to do. Cover those ongoing tasks, like fixing inconsistent addresses or how communication for these changes takes place. The road name changes, it's a big task across the board. It especially gets busy when areas that hadn't been touched for a while, like Estes Park, when we actually engage and we see a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's been a big uplift, not an uplift, but an uptick in activity with our municipal partners. So Estes and other groups are also looking at their addressing systems as well. Some of the more, some of the exciting things like how are forms done, how are deviation requests done, how are appeals handled. And then, like I mentioned, the emphasis on public safety. We realize that when there's poor addressing, it leads to poor response time or problems that occur with emergency services. So let's talk a little bit about clarity. Like I said, 20 years. The resolution, it's half the word count. It's half the size, and yet it's more comprehensive. So we've broken it up, highlighting a couple of the areas like assigning and changing road names, even just simplifying road name signage, mentioning how road name signage is done, addressing number assignment and how it's displayed, and of course those big ones, the request to deviate, and then the appeals process. But it was a big thing to see it shrink in size, but yet still be comprehensive. And there was a lot of repeats and, go to this section, and then you'd go in a big loop. And so it was a interesting read for sure. And yeah, I kind of throw that Mark Twain quote because I always think about that when I'm like, if I could write it shorter, it'd be greater. Twice the terms. So some of the problems we have in this resolution before was just what were the terms or what could we land on? What were the bedrock ideas that we could start to create this communication, like address range, who the county addressing coordinator was, historical significance, what that meant when we were having those conversations. There's a lot of new terms and a lot of information that we really tried to outline before we really dove into the process, procedure. A couple of the high-level updates for efficiency. As mentioned, now there's a detailed, standardized procedure for assignment, road naming, and we really tried to reduce ambiguity. The old resolution, like I mentioned, there were some repeats, and they wouldn't always match. So if somebody jumped to one section, they may not match with what was in an earlier section and vice versa. We really try to tie back to grid and interval addressing for consistency and help in assignment. The communication, so one of the first things that we noticed is there weren't templates. And I think we went through a big stretch where we were just trying to land on the right template to engage with our residents, whether it was informing them of a road name change or engaging with them when they're already in process. There was just a lot of work that had to be done to set up this standard communication. And we still refine this, the more we get requests from the residents, or property owners, I should say. And then again, we lean on that street inventory system as to be our document of record to really prevent duplicate road names. That usually is the big lead to safety issues or problems with response when you have two roads with the same name on opposite sides of the area. And if I'm flying, please pause if you have. We can come back to these too if there's any questions or comments or concerns. And I could go back 1 or 2 or 3 if we want to talk about anything.
Everyone good? Any questions right now? Commissioner Cavallo?
Sorry, John.
No, it's fine. I don't know at this time. There was one word in the resolution that I'll bring up when we
Perfect.
get into the details. And
Yeah, and the goal of this work session is to kind of provide high level. As we mentioned, we've had a lot of folks go through it, but that's why we wanted to bring it to you, to bring in that information and hear those ideas and changes.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Not a question, I just wanted to make a comment as we've been going through the slides. I appreciate the efficiency and the alignment and the clarity you put up in the corner. That's been helpful to kind of see how you're progressing through that. I just wanted to take note of that. That just really resonated with me to kind of know what you're focusing with that slide. And I know it seems common sense, but it just really struck out to me today that I really like how you presented that today. I just wanted to point that out. It's helpful for me. Thank you.
So jumping public safety, as noted, this is one of the big elements of this push to update the resolution. A lot of work was done with the partners, both LEDA and even some of the local agencies that provide these emergency services. The first thing is just stepping into their space and asking them directly, are there areas of concern? Are there areas where there have been misroutes in emergency response? LEDA specifically, they too are doing work on their addressing standards and their resolutions. And a lot of the things that we want to do is we want to partner with them and come to the same terms, the same definitions. As an example, when do we name a road that was a spur? It's a driveway, a long driveway, and all of a sudden we have houses popping up on that spur. And we came to the idea, well, 2 houses can cause issues, especially when you get into the more remote areas. So again, our alignment to LEDA that any 2 properties that have addresses on them requires us to look at a road name change or a road name addition. And then in the request to deviate, it's really saying, okay, we're going to take this request and we're going to bring our public partners in, our public safety partners in, both LEDA, OEM, and have them look at in the view of safety. Like, okay, if somebody steps out of the rules, which we don't want to happen, but if they do that, is there a public safety impact? And if they do it, do we then have to extend that same courtesy to others? We really want equity with the resolution, and that's why we bring them in that space. Did you have any questions for that one?
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
I might as well just do this now. Can you go back and just maybe that second bullet point,
This one here, the Lita
yeah,
one?
state that again? And
Sure.
maybe in a different one, just because this has happened a lot in my district, and so
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about, my mind went off to certain specific places, and so I want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Sure. And so part of the issues in the past with the resolution, when there was, I guess, it wasn't necessarily clear within our resolution, but then alignment to LIDA's, their documents and their working. We really worked hard with LIDA. We had them look at our original intent and our resolution and went through the update and just, we tried to align to what they're working with. And then I believe, I'm not sure when their document's going up for review with their board, but we also said, hey, we need to come to agreement on like how many houses can exist before we need to address that road. And that's when we landed on, well, 2 properties can cause issues, so that's when we would work in that space.
Okay, that's helpful. I know there's lots of, as you drive up there, everything's at the corner, on the bottom of the hill with just the numbers or the names, right? They didn't ever have that, some of them never had really addresses, I think, but they're just names. This is where so-and-so's house is or something. So that's kind of the thought I was thinking of, that there's probably some of those very unincorporated areas that maybe had one house for a long time, and now when someone's added one, and now you've got 2 homes. And so that's what I was thinking in my head, is I could think of a lot of examples that I've driven around that this
Absolutely.
fits. So thanks for explaining that again. Appreciate it.
Looks like Commissioner Cavallis has a question as well.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess perhaps pertaining to the third bullet, have we developed specific criteria by which a property owner can deviate from the rules? And one thing to think about maybe after we go through all this is how will this new updated resolution help prevent some of the conflicts that we've had over the years and improve communication? And in particular, how will it help address, if it's meant to address, the most recent situation that we have found ourselves in? So I think there are 3 questions embedded in there.
Sure.
But in particular, are there, Christina and Greg, are there particular specific criteria by which we could base, well, this is a legitimate request, we need to refer to LIDA and OEM, and then the other 2 we can deal with later?
Okay, I'll try
And
to
maybe
answer.
it's in there. I went 2/3 through this thing, and then
It's a lot.
why am I reading this thing?
It's a lot.
Sorry. Let you guys can
So
read
one
it.
of the things that we've done
Sorry.
with the resolution and in aligning with LIDA is that we have more clearly outlined what it means when something has to be renamed. It's very well outlined. Now, any property owner can come in and ask for a request to deviate. And what they will do, and now we've created a form that's a consistent form that they will fill out, and it'll be the same for everyone. And what it does is it marches them through, why do you feel that you should have be given an exception to the resolution? They'll outline that for us and provide supporting documentation, and then they'll submit that. And so anyone requesting to deviate will submit the exact same way with the exact same form. And then we'll review that against the resolution and LIDA's form and talk to the public safety partners that would be affected by that area so that they can weigh in and say, yeah, we've had lots of troubles with this area and it's really hard for us to find. We really feel like we need to follow the resolution. Or based on the information that was submitted by the property owners, we can see where there could be an exception. And we'll have to document those exceptions so that the next time it comes around again with somebody else, that we're treating everybody fairly and giving everybody a fair opportunity.
May I do a quick follow-up, please? Thank you. That response is helpful, which leads to another question, and we can set the others aside for now. And that is, how will we inform the public that this new process is being put in place and that they have a course of action that is the same for everyone, that is equitable.
So first of all, as soon as these are finalized, we'll update our addressing website and we'll make it very clear and outline the steps that are allowed. So if you get a notice that says your road needs to be named, then here's the process that happens. Here's it as we name it, we put in the road signs, we're done. Or we come up with names and they can choose the names, and if they don't like that it's named, then we will direct them to the request to deviate. And we do that pretty much with every time we're going to change an address or rename a road or name a road. We make sure that the property owners know this is the process that we go through. If you don't agree, there is a process that you can take. We don't hide that from them. It's going to be very much out there. You can put in a request to deviate. If that is not approved, then you will have an appeal process. Here's what the appeal process looks like. Here's the form for the appeal. So we'll walk them through the whole thing, and they will have all of that information up front, and we will help them go through that process if that's what they want. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, that's helpful. And I guess it's logical that unless you receive a notice from the county that there's consideration to change the name, the address name, I don't imagine there will be throngs of people going to the address, that particular website. I mean, if you're impacted by it, then you'll want to know.
Yes, and that's another thing, is that we're making sure through the resolution that everyone that could possibly be affected or impacted by naming a road or address changes, even if it may be in the future, if they have a vacant parcel, we will notify them that this is happening, so they will have an opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah. I would just note as well as, besides the revising the resolution for clarity, the goal is to do that same with the website, with the outreach, and try to having this workable resolution in place will help us out quite a bit in communicating and making it much more linear. So announcing it, but as you mentioned, usually the folks, when you get that letter or you get a notice that says there is a change, that's when they're very interested. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll keep going then.
Lori.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Lori. Please go ahead.
Commissioners, I just wanted to point out that there's a two-part process to the appeal. So the first is a request for deviation. That determination will be made by the staff and their partners. And then if the property owner does not agree with that outcome, then they appeal to the Board of County Commissioners. And so there is that opportunity. And then Commissioner Kafalas, you asked, how would this resolution apply to the most recent addressing situation? It would not in this case, because the most recent addressing situation has to do with a dispute over a road that was on a plat. And so the addressing resolution really does not impact that. Rather, it appears it's going to be a civil dispute between property owners.
We'll keep going.
All right, here we go. So mentioned a few new processes, and these are ones that we just wanted to highlight, just to bring clarity to the resolution. We've talked about, road name changes and address changes. So we really wanted to simplify, what causes a road name change, or what causes an address number change? So it's not always Christine or Alyssa that's implementing or pushing these. We get requests from property owners that request that a road that provides direct access to a property to be named, or that the name will be changed. We also get a request for private drives that provide that access to gain a name. The coordinator can initiate a road name change if the road is inconsistent with the rules of the resolution. And that's usually when a public safety group or someone steps in and says, hey, we have issues with this road and it's caused delivery response issues. The county addressing coordinator can also initiate a road name change or an assignment to a private drive when it's determined that that drive has more than one access. So that's kind of the high level and just the simplification of when that road name, when initiation takes place. Question? Okay. I've got a slide for number changes.
It sounds
as well.
like Commissioner
Oh.
Shaddock McNally has a question.
Yes.
One of those, again, I'm just thinking about examples of the last few years in my district, where we have some roads and lots of people saying that private driver, that Highway 66 or the old one is all, that's the address, but that's not where their road is. So is that specific one about address, is that kind of to those kinds of situations? Did you write that in response to that, or is that just kind of being proactive?
Couple miles up the road and it's unnamed, and there's 6 or 7 or 10 people up there that are addressed off of the road that's a mile away. Those are the ones that we're more concerned about, and those are the ones that we would really work with the public safety partners up there to say, is this an issue in this area? And those almost come to us right now through someone from public safety. Will say, dispatch will say, hey, we're having problems finding these. So we're not going out and searching for those right now, but it would definitely address those two kind of situations.
Okay, I appreciate your, it's not to be specific, but I mean, I almost can picture these places in my mind, so I appreciate some of this kind of getting to some of these. I mean, I'm sure you're trying to think ahead, because, we don't want to have to redo this resolution again in 5 or 10 years. We're hoping to write this so it's kind of for the growth and things coming, but also kind of situations we have and looking back at the situations that have been, as a result of kind of maybe a little bit of this resolution, not keeping up with the times, I guess, or something. So I'm just curious about that, and I see Lori has her hand up. But I appreciate it, thank you.
Christine, it seemed to me that when we looked at that Highway 66 issue, that we were concerned we wouldn't be able to keep the name Highway 66 because it was no longer Highway 66, but that we got some assurance from the state that it was okay to keep that. Am I remembering
Yes,
correctly?
that's correct. We worked with them and they basically said, we don't care what you do with it. And
Right.
so Highway
It's-
66 makes the most sense.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And that's how I remembered it too, Lori. It's just all the spurs off of some of that area yeah, so, yeah, you and I were, yeah, I remember that. It's
We do. Addressing numbers, we can highlight this quickly. New building name, or no new buildings, or if existing buildings don't have an address. If a property owner of a vacant land has requested an address number, the addressing coordinator can change numberings that are inconsistent with the resolution. And then if an access point, so usually it's a driveway change or something, if it shifts, and it shifts significantly to a point where we do have to slightly change the number to better align, again, like I mentioned with that system, that helps us keep track. Little quick note, owners cannot directly request the change of their number once it's been assigned, unless one of those other things takes place. So this is a big one. This is the one that, like, as you mentioned, when you'll get most of the emails or the notes from folks. But the request to deviate is if a property owner is presented with a road name or address change impacting their property, which they disagree with. I should also note affected property owners of the vacant land as well. They can request to deviate from the rules outlined in the resolution. They can submit that request. It's done in writing using an official form that's online, so we make sure we're collecting the right information. We talk a little bit about that agency review. The coordinator will invite the relevant public safety partners, EMS, law enforcement, fire, LEDA, OEM, just to review that, like I said, with that lens of public safety. The decision criteria, it is up to the addressing coordinator. It's based on maintaining the purpose of the resolution, along with that input from the safety agencies. The decision is presented in writing, and then an appeal, that's a prerequisite to the appeal, as Lori mentioned earlier, that it's a two-step process. The goal is to capture as much information as possible before the appeal, both from the public safety folks, all the research that we've done, and then also the input from the property owner. No deviations are allowed for a road naming hierarchy. And I can't exactly, the road naming hierarchy, you might have to key in on that, Christine.
So the road naming hierarchy is, if you think about, if there's duplicate road names, we will look at which road was there first. And then we go back to recorded plats, we go back and find out when was that road named. That one gets the priority if there's two and one has to change. The other thing is if were done similar times, we look at the number of affected property owners. So if there is a road that was there first, but it has 2 property owners on it, and then one came in later, but it has 10, we're gonna wanna change the one that has the 2, not the one that has 10, so that we have the least amount of effect on individual property owners.
The sequential numbering and the parity, we just don't want numbers to jump around. That would be the worst thing if you drive right past it, and we see that in the county, and those are things that we have to change. So when the numbers are out of sequence.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cavallis.
Thank you. On this particular slide regarding the agency review, you list various public safety partner agencies. I don't see anywhere in here checking with the U.S. Postal Service. Shouldn't that be something we check? Because sometimes, for example, people will have their medicine delivered to them, that sort of thing.
So when it comes to the Postal Service, that is mailing, whereas what we're doing is site address. Now, we don't make it common practice to check with them. They kind of go by whatever we say. However, if we're in a situation, we really, as much as we're putting this in a resolution, we're saying these are the steps, we do look at each one kind of individually, because there's always unique situations. So in a situation, if a property owner came to us and said, hey, I have my medication delivered, which is something that came up with Estes, we would work with them to figure out what is happening, what's going on here, how can we best help you? It's not just, we're gonna change it, you're done, go off on your own. We really help them walk through that process of what they need to do to get their address changed and take all of those things into consideration. Does that answer your question?
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So you walk them through because they would ultimately have to be the person that changes things with the post office. So that's not something where the post office is looped in, like, here's a spreadsheet of the new addresses, or, I don't know how that works.
The answer is yes to both of those. So when we do a change monthly, we send out notifications of any new addresses, change addresses, new roads, road name change. And we send that out on the 15th of every month. And it goes to multiple Larimer County departments. It goes to USPS. And we've established over the last couple years that we've been doing this, we've established direct contacts with them. So we have specific people that we send them to. And we work with the local post offices as well. So we make sure that all of that information gets sent out. And we do have that listed out on the addressing website, which will change once we get this implemented. But we help the property owners, give them a list of here's everything you need to consider. So we try to give them a checklist, but we do those initial notifications to the post office, to LIDA, and to internal Larimer County departments.
Thank you for explaining that. It's helpful. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
This was one of my questions I was going to ask at the end when I saw that you had this support model, because this was an issue in the past where, getting folks, especially with medications that are mailed to the home that people really need to have, and trying to get that set up with the pharmacy and the U.S. Postal Service. Sometimes that takes a little time to get that all changed. And so are we there to help them if they don't, even with you guys giving on the 15th, and there might be a glitch, who's helping them maybe the next month if things are still not arriving or coming, or if there is any glitches? I know it's rare, but, one person looking for medicine or something, it could be really a frustration for those residents.
So I would have to say that Alyssa does a fantastic job of this. She really gets intimate with these people that are having changes, and she goes above and beyond to help them. And we would never turn anyone away that was having trouble. We will go that extra mile to make sure and reach out to the post office and help figure out why is this not working. So we would never want to leave a property owner just out, flailing on their own. We will help them. And they do reach out to us. They check regularly. Hey, it's not updated on the USPS site yet. And if it's not, then Alyssa will reach out to the post office and say, hey, why isn't this done yet? So we really make sure it's really an end-to-end thing that we do. We provide a service, and if we make a change to these people's lives, which it is, we make sure to the best of our ability that it's all taken care of. It's not just change the address and go on our way. We really make sure and follow up and make sure that everyone is okay.
Thank you for the explanation. I knew that's what you were doing, because that's what you've been doing all along. I just wanted you to be able to state that for all those people listening in the public. So I just want to make sure they knew, because I knew a lot of you have been going above and beyond trying to help people, because we all struggle sometimes making sure packages get where they need to be. So I just wanted to thank you for answering that question so well.
So if requests deviate, it's gone through, we've heard public safety partners, and we do come up with a decision to continue with our change. Then there's that process of appeal. The affected property owners of an address or road name change whose request to deviate has been submitted, reviewed, not approved, they step into the appeal process. They again have an official appeal form on the addressing website. It should include all required information and supporting documentation. So it really comes back. It's almost where they're more it's not that they're upset, but they're looking at the process that we've done, and does the work that we've done align with the resolution? And we want it to be submitted within 30 days of that original decision on the request to deviate. Within 30 calendar days, when Christine gets it, she looks at the board's schedule, and she works with the scheduling folks over here who take care of all the matching of calendars, and they try to get the at least the appointment made within 30 days. It may not happen within 30 days. Usually we have to wait to when there's availability with the board's schedule. And Lori, I may lean on you a little bit. I know we talked about what type of meeting this needs to be. We talked about it either being a special meeting or a place where a hearing can take place. I wanted to confirm that. That's because, again, we outlined that in the resolution, but I wanted some more clarity.
I'm glad Bill is in the back, so maybe he can help me out with this, but I assume this would be a special meeting of the board or a decision that would go at your administrative matters meeting, because you would need to make a decision regarding this, and so I would defer to Bill on what the best way to do that is.
Thank you, Lori.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill Rasu, Larimer County Attorney. As long as it's noticed 24 hours in advance as a public meeting, it can happen on any of your agendas. So I think it's going to be more of a preference for the type of meeting. It might not fit very well to have a kind of a mini hearing within an admin matters agenda. You could even put it on the land use agenda, for example, if you wanted. I think the intent in drafting the appeal process was for it to look like appeals that are done under the land use code. So if you get a determination by planning and that decision is appealed to you for review, that should look a lot like this appeal process.
Question. So is it quasi judicial then? And so does it do ex parte conversations? Is that a piece of that at that point?
Yes, it'll look like that.
Okay.
On a much smaller scale, but
Sure.
yes, at the root of it, it'll look like a mini hearing where you're reviewing the decision that was made, and then you're reviewing the grounds of the appeal by the appellant and giving them an opportunity to explain to you why they believe it was an error. Staff will be able to provide additional information to explain why they made the decision that they did, and then you all would ultimately rule on the appeal.
That would be good to spell out in either, just because sometimes community members don't understand why we aren't able to sort of talk to them at some point, because we're trying to make a fair decision right, based on the facts and, like you said, safety issues and other kinds of issues. And so we just a way to sort of spell that out so that people aren't confused. But the process is confusing in many cases. And so, like, the more we can spell out sort of what an appeals process might look like, and there again, maybe a lot won't rise to that level, but just so it's out there, so folks understand that it becomes more quasi-judicial and it's less sort of, just us working with the neighbors, right? Commissioner Cafalas.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up question to build on that bit of conversation, and that is typically when we have land use hearings and all of that, we base our decisions on very objective review criteria. And so what would we be basing our decisions on here? Is it specific things in the resolution? And if so, maybe as part of spelling this process out, we might want to make sure it's clear to the commissioners as well as the public. What are those, those parameters or those criteria that we're using, to make an informed, objective decision?
So in the request to deviate, it's very spelled out. We ask the property owner to say, what part of the resolution do you feel that you should be able to deviate from? So I'll go back and look at those documents, but it's the goal is that by the time it gets to you, it's very spelled out. You will get the actual request to deviate packet, and then I will summarize that for you so you don't have to go into too much detail. And then we have the appeals process spelled out, but we'll go back and review that and just make sure that it's very clear, because we weren't sure which session it was going to be at. So now that we know this, we'll make sure that those forms will be exactly the information that you need, and maybe get a review of those forms before we finalize them so that you can be sure that everything is in there. And the goal is like you said, to not have things get to the appeal, that have it get to the deviate, and then a decision is made with the public safety partners, and that should be pretty clear. And I think it'll be much easier with this new resolution, because that was part of the problem was in the past, is that the old one was so confusing. And so it was very easy for property owners to jump around to different areas in the resolution and say, well, it says this here, but it says this here, and I'm interpreting this a certain way. And so this has made it very clear. So I think from the very beginning, it'll make it much easier for property owners to understand why we're doing what we're doing.
Thank you. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Madam Chair, I appreciate your question about the quasi-judicial and the hearing parts. And I do, that was part of my similar to what Commissioner Cafalas said, but I think if it's very clear that if it gets to that point, that we're only going to be ruling on the criteria. There's no, and Bill, I'm looking at you, and any discretion for us to say, well, doesn't matter if it meets the criteria. So I don't want it to be where people think, well, I'll go from here and just jump up to here. And so how, is that what you're saying? You're trying to get them all the way through that process, and how, with design this in mind, so that we don't have that conflict, because we wouldn't be able to talk to them anyway. And that's why I appreciate the Madam Chair bringing that point up. And any way we can look to alleviate any confusion or not clarity with our residents, so they understand our role and why this process is in place, I think would be advantageous, being proactive down the road, so we don't. I can see where this could be going if we're not careful. So I appreciate her sparking that question. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the criteria that deviations will be judged by is in the section that's on deviations, and it's the second to last paragraph. And the review criteria is whether the deviation will maintain the intent and purpose of the resolution, and following consideration from affected emergency response and public safety agencies. So it's not, a check the box criteria, but that is the review criteria that deviations will be measured by. Can you deviate from a requirement and still maintain the overall purpose and intent of the resolution, which is public safety, ease of use, those kinds of things? When it comes to an appeal, when you all get an appeal, your review is spelled out as reviewing to determine if the deviation decision was incorrect, or if the decision did not align with the intent and purposes of the resolution. So when you're reviewing an appeal, you're reviewing the same considerations that the initial decision was based on. With respect to the process, I'll look at the land use code appeals section and I'll see what it has to say about the quasi-judicial nature of that proceeding, and see if it talks about no ex parte communications and things like that. Regardless, it makes sense to put it in here so it's really clear. And that may be something we add to the land use code if it's not in there for appeals. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, go ahead, Commissioner Capos. Yeah, my question was around, so like, it could be somebody, it could be one person that's driving this, and it could be 10 people on this road. And so I do think that, I think not having ex parte conversations may be, because there is a sort of fairness. There may be people who want this, and there, like I said, one person is driving this, and so they may speak against that. They may want, I mean, just because one person is like, I don't want to change, and I don't care if the fire department can't reach me. I mean, their 9 neighbors are like, yeah, we actually want the fire department to reach us, though, right? And so I think, the ex parte, that's where that sort of fairness comes in. I mean, if we're trying to negotiate too much in this process, it may look like we're taking one side or another. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that. There again, like I, if I were in the situation, I would really like to be found if there's a medical emergency at my home.
Right.
And so, but I know some people, I mean, are really passionate about this issue, and so, so there may be two sides on this, right? There may be residents who want to speak against something like that. So it almost does need to be set up in this sort of the way that land use hearings
Yeah.
are. Commissioner Kafals had a question, I believe.
Not so much a question, perhaps a suggestion for consideration. And when Bill, our county attorney, asked us to, referred us to the section in the resolution, reasons to deviate or whatever, I found myself thumbing through this because it's a multi-page document. I don't know if we typically put page numbers in resolutions. That's a consideration for you. And also maybe on the website that's referring to this document, maybe there's a bit of a table of contents or something. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, so got about 15 minutes. We'll kind of maybe fly through some of these. Thank you.
That happened. Thank you. So we'll jump ahead. Again, we can follow up later on both of these reviews. Another one that comes up is historical significance. So in the previous resolution, there was a lot of conversation. This is just one highlight of where there were 2 sections of the old resolution that brought information forward, and they weren't necessarily in sync. So when does historical significance, when it should be retained, when the addressing coordinator should step in and say, well, public safety overrules this. What we wanted to do with this, and this is one of the definitions that we came up with, was to come up with what does it mean to be historically significant? And it really is tied to that place, event, person that's had a meaningful impact on the history, culture, traditions of Larimer County or its communities. And we actually set it out to be particularly associated with events of it or impact of individuals that have occurred with past 50 years. Now, that's not to say we had this, conversation like, if you're in the 60s and Neil Armstrong just steps on the moon, that's a significant achievement, and pretty soon there's roads named after Neil Armstrong right away. So that's not a hard and fast rule, but we wanted to put something in place to help guide, well, what does it mean to be historically significant? And we realize that that can be, we have some issues where we have historically significant road names that are tied to characters that we're not necessarily proud of. That, I think it was, is it Pengreen Park? Yeah. So there's other issues to revisit historical significance as well. So it's, again, it's something that we need to lean in on. It is something that can come to the board eventually to be reviewed. And we don't necessarily, we're not historians, but we want to be mindful. We want the requester to present their information to us. We'll do some research on our part, but the review, again, the decision will probably it will come to the Board of Commissioners for those historical names. And again, it's a balance. It's a balance between this historical significance, what things have been in past. As you mentioned, people are very tied to it, but we want to get people to their doorstep when we need to. So we have to balance that out with public safety. So a couple of addressing issues that have impacted. This is just our example section. So engine 71, where are you? The engine, these are, three different engines that are responding to one incident. It was a fire. Engine 71 had all the water. And we had two others, Ladder 71 and Tender 72. They had most of the people that were responding to the incident. You could see some folks, Engine 71 took the long way to get there because they had the incorrect addressing. They headed down the road and they realized, oh, we're going the wrong direction. So then they had to come up. Well, the other two, Ladder 71 and Tender 72, didn't have water, had plenty of bodies, and they ended up rushing into this emergency, into an active fire without water support. That's again, that's just highlights the safety issues that a lot of our first responders, and that's just in this fire situation. Then we had two medical emergencies. This happened twice, same individual, same address. There was a delay in arriving to the correct site, which was the north site, the green arrow. You could see it's labeled as 160 Riverside Drive, Unit B2. Well, there's also a 160 East Riverside Drive, Unit B2 down the road quite a bit, half a mile at least. So that occurred. They were able to respond and head up the road. And again, later someone called in a call for West Riverside, which doesn't exist, sent them south again. Same incident, same issues, same delay. So in Estes, in certain areas, this happens quite a bit. And Mike Murphy, who in the PI groups, that's like one of, I guess, maybe his hobby, is he works with these responders and he collects all this information that happens. We've put out the call to some public agencies. They're usually, or public safety agencies, they're usually too busy, but they do share these circumstances with us, and we're trying to do our best to catalog them.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally?
And I think we cannot forget that during high tourist season, when some of these things happen, those times and getting to those locations is really complicated with the amount of traffic and people getting kind of used to the new flow anyway. So I also think that's something to take into consideration for some of these high tourist areas, that response time is so critical when you have the extra traffic and folks that it's hard to get around. So I appreciate you showing these examples, and I just want to call that to, since those are both Estes examples, it's so important to understand that one major festival or all the roads, it can be really, like, every minute counts. So thank you.
Absolutely. There's also a conversation around familiarity, whether it's the dispatch groups or the public, the safety responders, or even the people that are in the homes making the phone calls. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of, vacation homes. There's a lot of folks in the areas coming and going that aren't familiar. There's new hires that are on staff at dispatch or emergency response, and not all of them have the same familiarity with these areas. So it does cause confusion when they're making the phone calls, like it mentions here, West Riverside, that doesn't exist. There's also issues with the new driver that's in the fire engine running down the road trying to get someplace that he thinks he knows, when there's some, it's not always present. And even Google, we talk about Google will lead you the wrong path. There's tools that have been revisited in emergency response to shift away from Google Maps because some of the mapping is wrong in that system. So there's been misroutes due to Google mapping as well. And we've talked a little bit about like cell signals and connectivity and using technology to kind of act as a Band-Aid for some of these location issues. We've had issues where a person's on another side of a mountain, making a phone call and the global positioning puts them on the wrong side. So trying to get to people is hard in those areas, and that's why we really are pushing hard on the addressing.
Well, and these are people that want to save lives. I mean, they got into this business to take care of people and protect people. So, it's not just the person. I mean, it is the person who's maybe suffering a medical emergency or has a fire. But, I mean, the frustration and the sadness for the people who have to take care of that person and maybe came too late or could have done better or could have saved the home. I mean, there is impact on the people providing these services, not just the homeowner, right? And so I do think, yeah, I mean, these people care for us. We should help them save lives. That piece is really important. Because there's trauma that happens when people can't rescue someone or save someone or stop the house from burning down that they experience as first responders too.
100%. All right. So I'll go a little bit in the addressing support model, but before I do that, I do want to again thank Bill for all the work he did. I do want to tell this story because Bill was away, he was sick. I think you had COVID. But then all of a sudden, this draft shows up in our inbox, totally revised, and a lot of that cut and a lot of that clarity. Bill did a lot of that work in the resolution, so absolutely, thank you. Christine and Lori, and then Kimberly with Lita, their legal staff there. We've really tried to bring a lot of voices just to kind of catch those clarity. And there will be things we miss. There was misspelled words when we went to, I'm like, wait a minute, I think you're the one that circles things and finds them. But we realize it's an effort to try to get towards clarity and towards a good service, and part of that work is just trying to make the resolution meet that need and meet the goals. Just to highlight of Christine and the work that she's doing to actually support this. The old resolution went for a while without the level of support that we needed, without Christine and Alyssa and others. And so there's a lot of work that's being done, just the services that are now lined up to support the resolution. So I think we're at the time where, yeah, the resolution it can actually be enacted, it can actually be carried out, and it can make a change. So these are just some of the high-level services that are provided, just the basics of site addressing or road naming or renaming. I know we're short on time, so I'll go a little bit quick. Reconciliation and maintenance, working with the Postal Service and LEDA and all the municipalities and updating our data to reflect what's reality. There's a lot of movement in addressing right now to address these, not just ourselves, as mentioned, municipalities. A lot of just the appeal and deviation support that Christine and her team does. Even in the case that you guys were talking about, there's a lot of engagement with the two parties, with the case that you guys were mentioning for the addressing, whether it's a private issue. They come to us for documentation. They come to us for guidance. They work with ourselves and planning and other groups with the county. And then the public and interagency collaboration. When there's OEM, we have discussions about like, hey, we need to work on this. We need to work on readdressing to clear things up and make things safe. So I just want to highlight some of the services that her and her team are up to. It is an absolutely overwhelming full-time job for a lot of folks in that group. And again, that's where the presentation ended. I thought we might have more than 5 minutes, but I realized that's how things go. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we asked questions along the way, so we probably don't have too much. But Commissioner Cafalas, please go ahead.
Two things very quickly. One is regarding the resolution on page 1, the second whereas, it cites the Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 30, which has to do with county government. The word morals jumped out at me. I suspect we can't change that because that's in statute. Maybe you could look at that.
I assume so, but I'll verify.
And it's just that it kind of, different interpretations of what that means, and if we actually need that there. My second comment point, may I, Madam Chair? So regarding the definition that you all presented to us on historical significance, the only comment suggestion I have there is to perhaps make sure it complements or aligns with the reference in the 22-1041 review criteria. There's a specific review criterion that has to do with historical significance, and that's important. Not that it has to copy that, but I want to make sure there are no contradictions, perhaps. It's one of those darn review criterion that when we do 1041. Thank you, that's it. Oh, by the way, thanks a lot for all the good work, and Kimberly at LIDA as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any closing words?
Thank you all for all this work. We know this has been a area of resident concerns and lots of things happening, especially in certain parts of the county. And I just want to thank you for your perseverance and diligence and especially you, Christine, just trying to work through this and get to what the intent has been all along for public safety and taking care of our residents and to address some things that needed to be, fixed and find solutions for, and then also look at going forward because we're growing and people are building and growing into the unincorporated parts of the county. And it's really great to hear that municipalities are now working and looking and at what we're doing and trying to maybe copy or partner with. And that's really important, and especially with our partners at LIDA who are, and give my regards to Kimberly, thank her, that this is really got to be a regional model because we need folks to respond, and sometimes we have mutual aid and maybe the sheriff's office is going to respond some areas or someone else has got to respond to some areas because of response times or folks tied up and resources tied up. So I think, thinking of it that way too is it's not like, one group is always responsible for one area. We might have to have lots of folks, like the fire department's responding to one area, like by my house with Bertha, Cooter, and Loveland all responded. And so not everyone is always familiar with those areas. And so this is another reason for when we have a multiple agency response, how this is also really important too. So I want to just thank you all for your work and I appreciate this update today. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just close by saying, adding my thanks. Thank you, Christine and Greg. This is it's been a lot of work, and I appreciate all the work you've done. I know it hasn't always been easy, and I know there's been some frustrations along the way, but hopefully with the resolution, we'll provide that clarity. And then just want to, thank Alyssa, who's not here, but the support and the services for the community members is really, I think, essential to making this really successful, because it can feel daunting and a little scary to be like, not just medicines, but anything that you might get through the mail. And so really helping people work through that, you've obviously know that is a big piece, but, that takes time and patience to do that. And so we appreciate you focusing on that as well. So thank you. This is great. I mean, we'll look forward to seeing the resolution then come before us, and maybe we'll find some clarity on what the hearing might look like. I think that's the only space that's still sort of maybe up in the air, although we've kind of talked through that today, and I think we kind of know what we're looking for at this point. So with that, it's 11:01 and we're adjourned. Thank you all.